Hey there, I'm David Quantic, creator of The City Edition Seattle, a new docu-series about Seattle's history as viewed through the lens of our local architecture and urban design. I'm so excited to present the world premiere of City Edition's pilot episode about one of Seattle's most iconoclastic and original architects, Robert Reichert. I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that if you are like me and you love wildly original architecture and stories about eccentric artists, you are in for a treat. The episode is only about 8.5 minutes long, so stick around afterwards because Reichert scholar and Historic Seattle's preservation advocacy manager, Jeff Murdock, will join me and we'll share some background about how the documentary came to be and also some more details about Robert Reichert and his very unique life. So here it is, the world premiere of the City Edition, Seattle.
If you live in Seattle, you may have driven past it without even noticing it's there. But if you did see this one-of-a-kind structure, you likely haven't forgotten it. Nestled into the north side of Capitol Hill, just below St. Mark's Cathedral, is a house so unique that during its construction, art students came to sketch it. Journalists compared it to a block of cheese. When it went on the market earlier this year, most of the tours were for people who just wanted to see what it was like inside. But if you think this home is unique, wait until you find out about the one-of-a-kind, church-going, organ-playing, motorcycle-riding renegade architect who designed it. His life and work is just one of the extraordinary stories behind the unique structures and design of one of America's most remarkable urban landscapes. This is the City Edition, Seattle.
Robert Reichert was an architect who practiced in Seattle from the 1950s until he died in 1996.
Born in 1921 in North Dakota, Robert Reichert soon moved with his parents to Minneapolis. An only child in a family of devout Christian Scientists, Robert was passionate about architecture, religion, and organ music.
His father was a traveling produce salesman, and Reichert would sometimes accompany his father on these business trips. And they would stop at some of the churches on these trips. He was just really impacted, really affected by the music and the interior spaces, the light, and the architecture.
But Reichert had one more obsession early on that was a little less conventional.
He also really loved classic cars and motorcycles. He started drawing motorcycles as a kid. He made a choice as a middle schooler, really, that he was going to be an architect and he was going to be an organist, and he loved motorcycles and never really strayed from that his entire life and career.
In high school, he began working for a local Minneapolis architect, Clyde Smith, who was also a member of their church.
And whenever a project would come in that was a single-family home, for example, really less complicated project, then Clyde Smith would actually pass the job off to Robert to complete. So he was actually completing projects while he was still in high school.
Reichert also performed as a church organist, which he continued to do after he graduated high school in 1939. After his first 2 years of undergraduate study at the University of Minnesota, Reichert moved to Seattle with his parents after being recruited for a draftsman position at Boeing. He spent the next decade working in Seattle and finishing his undergraduate studies in Minnesota, as well as his master's in architecture at Harvard's prestigious Graduate School of Design. He finally settled in Seattle with his parents in 1951 and opened his own design studio.
They say that most architects improve over time and they do their best work at the ends of their careers, but I think that Robert Reichert was really fully fleshed as an architect when he designed the Bellevue Church and also his own house and studio.
His design for the first Church of Christ Scientist in Bellevue would never be built, but it was the Reichert home that really put him on the map.
Reichert always lived with his mother. She actually gave him the lot where he built his house on Queen Anne. It was just after his father had passed away. When Reichert started to build his house, it was really nothing like what people would expect to see there.
In addition to accommodations for him and his mother, Reichert also wanted the home to be his design studio, a storage place for his motorcycles, and an organ concert venue.
A large part of the section of the house is really devoted to the pipe organ.
Reichert's home was his first opportunity to create something that defined his unique design philosophy.
It's really difficult to describe Robert Reichert's architecture. The buildings really stick out as being these unusual sculptures in the landscape.
Reichert's neighbors did not share his outside-the-box philosophies about architecture.
Neighbors described it as a Freudian nightmare.
Reichert also did himself no favors by holding organ concerts in the house late at night and repairing his motorcycles in his driveway.
Neighbors would drive by and throw tomatoes at the house. One neighbor he wrote about, while he was working on his motorcycle in the garage, started spraying him with their garden hose.
But not everyone in town hated Reichert's style.
Willard Egan showed up at Reichert's house studio in Queen Anne, came to the front door and said, "I'd like you to build a house like this."
A retired admiral in the Navy, Egan hired Reichert to build a home for him and his wife.
The really steep slope that's densely forested provided sort of a backdrop to his two-dimensional idea of this building. So there's a horizontal base that's very strong and projects out as a sort of a hood over the entry. And then he adds punches of red, kind of these little round circles.
The entrance to the home is a modest sliding glass door that provides access to a small utility room and a staircase to the second floor leading to the kitchen and main bedroom. One more flight up reveals the highlight of the home, a living room with a soaring vaulted ceiling.
At the very peak of the building, there was a little birdhouse.
Reichert often included birdhouses in the design of his homes.
He never wrote about why he did this.
In January of 1961, Reichert's mother collapsed while making him breakfast. Their strict adherence to Christian Science beliefs prevented them from seeking out professional medical assistance. His mother died that same day.
It was clearly a really traumatic event for him. He visited her in the mortuary for a week until they finally said, "You have to let her go." He experienced a period of depression and decided he couldn't live in the house any longer. During those times, the people who had taken to harassing him followed him wherever he went, and they stole his car, stole his motorcycle.
Reichert taught at the University of Washington until the late 70s. Throughout the 80s and 90s, he continued to play the organ at local churches and take occasional design jobs. And he continued to ride his cherished motorcycles. Already a loner by nature, Reichert became increasingly reclusive. When he passed away in 1996, he was found wearing his motorcycle leathers with $2,200 cash in his pocket since he didn't believe in checking accounts. But Reichert's vision lives on in the structures he designed that remain in the Seattle area.
He really thought that architecture should be kind of a metaphysical idea, that the people who experience it or use it kind of get that sense of uplift. He really wanted these buildings to somehow speak to the soul of the person occupying them.
Over the years, various owners have altered Reichert's original designs. In the late 1980s, the deck was added to the Egan House. For many years, the bold graphic elements on the exterior of his Queen Anne home were concealed by plain siding, and the unique entry decor was discarded. In 2020, a new owner restored Reichert's vision. His homes serve as monuments to the iconoclastic architect who defied the conventional mid-century residential aesthetic and proved himself to be one of Seattle's most original and enduring architects.
Welcome back. I am joined by Jeff Murdock of Historic Seattle. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, David.
First off, Jeff, if you could just briefly explain what Historic Seattle is and what its mission is.
Sure. Historic Seattle is a public development authority, a PDA, and we were established in 1973. That was a time when historic preservation was sort of coming into its own in Seattle. It was really popular, and preservation was seen as a public benefit to save our old historic buildings and neighborhoods like the Market and Pioneer Square. And since that time, over more than 50 years, we've saved dozens of historic properties. Our mission is saving meaningful places that foster lively communities. And we do that work through 3 areas of focus: advocacy, education, and preservation. Preservation comes from our work stewarding our own properties. We currently own 10 historic properties associated with the arts, public spaces, homes for nonprofits, affordable housing. You may know some of them, like the Good Shepherd Center, Washington Hall, and Cadillac Hotel in Pioneer Square. In our advocacy work, we partner with communities to save the places that are important to them. They may be neighborhoods or tenants of apartments that are set for demolition, or owners of old buildings that need help with rehabilitation. So we often help them get their buildings landmarked and then help them try to find funding to do the rehabilitation work. And finally, our educational programs kind of reflect the other aspects of our work. We plan and put on lectures, tours, and workshops focused on the built environment, preservation, and history.
Awesome. That's an amazing mission. So I just want to describe a little bit about how we came to collaborate on this project. I've been an architecture enthusiast for almost as long as I've been making film. So making a series about Seattle's architecture was something that I've personally wanted to do since moving here in 2016. And one of my favorite things to do is explore Seattle on my bike. And last year I rode past Egan House on my bike, and I was like immediately drawn to it. It's such a unique structure. And I had a hunch that it had a really cool story behind it. And I was obviously not disappointed. Um, at the time, the home was for sale, and I thought maybe the timing was right to make Egan House and Reichert the subject for the pilot episode of the City Edition. And I called the property agent who was, in the process of showing the home. And I was surprised to find out that Historic Seattle actually was the owner of the property. Why did Historic Seattle own the Egan House?
Well, we acquired the building in 1998. It was designed by Reichert and had been built in 1958, so it was kind of a little dilapidated at the time, over 40 years old. And at the same time, Parks and Recreation had acquired the property around the building and under the building. So it was kind of a unique situation where most buyers may not want to buy a building where they don't own the land. So Historic Seattle often steps in situations like that. I think that's how we initially came to own the property, in spite of its kind of sad condition and risk of demolition.
So it wasn't in very good shape?
No, it was had a lot of water damage. It's a really unique site, as you'll see. It's on the super steep slope. There had been some small kind of slides in the 70s, and so the building really needed some work. And beyond that, buildings of this style, kind of a modernist building like this, wasn't necessarily really appreciated by the public very much, or even among preservationists for that matter. It's not an example of Pacific Northwest modernism, which is kind of what we all have learned to love in our area. It's something very different. And it was just as provocative, I would say, in 1998 as it was in 1958. So owning the Egan House allowed Historic Seattle to expand our outreach, to kind of convey more discussions about properties of this style and type. Our educational programs were able to kind of grow beyond the 19th century buildings in Pioneer Square, for example. After we did the remodel, we had the property landmarked. It was unanimously designated by the Landmarks Board. That was in 2010. And then finally, last year, we put a preservation easement on it and decided to sell it. And that means it's both protected by the Landmarks Ordinance and by an easement that we hold on the property. So that allowed us to redeploy the money of owning that house into other ventures that reflect our mission. And the easement means that the new owners have an ongoing relationship with Historic Seattle, and we can help them with preservation work that they need to have done.
Okay, but they're not allowed to change it.
There are elements that are protected by the ordinance, by the landmarking, and as well as by our easement. some interior elements and exterior elements as well are protected. That's all kind of called out in the designating ordinance with the city as well as in our easement. So yeah, it's protected. The most important character elements are protected on the building.
Okay, great. And now I was, I approached Historic Seattle about making this film, and then I was so excited to realize that you had actually written your graduate thesis about Reichert. So you had this depth of knowledge. I read your thesis for research and used a lot of that in the scripting of the film. What drew you to Reichert initially when you were in graduate school?
Well, I started at the UW College of Architecture in 1997, just a year after Reichert died. And I think he was something of a legend in our school. Some of our professors actually had him as an instructor for design studio. And they talked about how he would come in at midnight on his Harley Davidson, dressed in studded leathers and do desk crits, late into the night. And there's also something about the legacy of his buildings too. They were very different from everything else that we were studying at the time. So, it was all very provocative. And his archive actually got donated to the University of Washington Library's special collections at that time. And so I just decided to make a few visits to special collections and kind of look at the materials. And they were very unusual. They were just like piles of photographs. He did napkin sketches when he would go out late at night to coffee shops and sketch his projects, hundreds of them. And his drawings were all on trace paper, graphite on trace. So they were all very, fragile and kind of crumbled. And he would draw on any shape of paper. So it wasn't even like the pages could be coordinated easily and kept together. So, anyway, I ended up describing all of these items and developing a finding aid. I actually worked at special collections for a while. And eventually a story just evolved from all that material. And that eventually became my master's thesis.
Well, I'm so grateful for all your hard work in preserving his legacy and sharing all your knowledge with us, with your both your work with Historic Seattle and also your thesis. So thank you so much for doing that. And I'm really lucky to have found Historic Seattle and also you for helping me learn more about him. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for joining us.
Great, thank you.
So what's next for the City Edition? Well, I'm in pre-production for the second episode, which will be about Seattle's Washington Hall, which, by the way, is also owned by Historic Seattle. So I'll be partnering with them again in creating this next episode. And if you have any questions or comments about anything you've seen in the pilot episode, or you want to know more about the series, you can contact me through the web portal, the email portal on my website, davidquantic.com. I'm currently searching for production partners and funding resources to continue producing more episodes of the City Edition. So thanks for joining us. And also thank you so much to Seattle Design Festival for inviting me to share this with the audience of the festival this year. Thanks a lot.